Okay, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna sharpen up this chain on this Stihl 400C. It's just a 20-inch chain. I already got it pulled off. I'm just gonna soak it in a little bit of gas here. When I do decide to do a chain, I try to do it, or try to clean at least a couple so I can get a good use out of this gas. This is just what I'm using. I'm sure you could use some type of parts cleaner or something. It's all kind of doing the same thing. But for me, that's the easiest option. We've got this Lucky Dog manufacturing plate here for grinding the chains. I like this plate. I just think I need to break it in more. It's not 100% smooth on all my chains. The only reason I can say that is I was just sharpening the 404 chain, I guess last weekend, and I know that chain hasn't been thrown or anything, so I know it's not bent. But for some reason, it doesn't rotate perfectly freely. Just one spot on it was slightly difficult to pull through the slot. The slot is very tight. That's why I say that it needs to be broken in a little bit and used. The other thing we need while that thing is soaking, that chain is soaking, is the air compressor. And the nozzle. So quick note while I'm right here. So this is right here is a new 20-inch chain. You know, just your standard Stihl RS chain, round ground. So when I have a new chain, I'll run that new chain one time until it's dull. I'll take the rakers down a little bit just so it cuts decent. I feel that just your out of the box chain doesn't cut the way that I would like for it to cut. You got to use the spikes or press on it a lot, and I just don't really like that style of cutting, but everyone has their own personal preference. Just getting her cleaned up here. So this is just a little saw blade. I think this was from Lowe's probably 20 years ago. 15 to 20 years ago now. So what I do, it's the perfect width to stick in these bars, and I just come in here and get all that sawdust out. Just like that. Then I'll come back with my air hose and clean out that slot. So if you're watching this and you're new to this channel, I've done both a video on my opinion on bars and on chains. So if you're interested in hearing about what I believe is the best bar and the best chain, you know, for each application, there's, you know, obviously a best option for each. Go ahead and go to my channel and find those videos. They're not too far ago. They're just a couple months ago now. Get this chain grinder plugged in, and we'll clean that chain up and start sharpening. So I run this Symington 451C outside here because it creates a lot of dust. Every opportunity that I have to run it outside. Obviously if it gets too cold, then I don't want to run it outside here because your fingers get cold. So what I do is, once my chain is done, this is kind of a new method that I found to be the easiest. Oh, we gotta get our chain here. We're getting fought by. Hang on. You really need two hands to do that. There we go. So I throw it in here, and I'm gonna blow it off. Alright, so now my chain is clean. I'm running this hose to clean off that surface that I'm going to be sharpening. So I feel that doing it this way is really the fastest way to do it. We can see I've got a little bit of pitch buildup on this wheel. You always want to dress your wheel when you're starting on a new chain, and I try to just slightly dress it between doing, you know, this side and then the other side. We're just kind of eyeballing it up here. The light doesn't really do anything when it's light outside. And it would help if we switch over to 050. Personally, I like the 063 chains better. I'm running this this adjustment all the way forward. It's got a, you can go kind of more towards the middle here. I just run it all the way forward because that's the easiest when the chains are new for you to get a good grind. And I have this one loose, and I'll dial that part in the height once stink bug right there. I'll dial in the height once I get this wheel dressed up. So we'll move this saw. Don't want to get that all full of dust. Let's get started. Oh, other thing. Always want to have a marker with you so you know where you started from. Black usually works the best. These fine point Sharpies I like to use for the porting stuff, but I'll just use it one time here for this application just so I know where my start point was. It's good to know. Okay, so for dressing, I don't know if this is the correct way, but I seen that going from inside out works better. And these are both multi-point stones. That's an upgrade that you can get. I ordered mine from Madson's. And I'm just trying to get the entire wheel cleaned up. So I got to go a little bit more. That was not enough. But with these adjustments, less is more when you're dressing this wheel up. I'm kind of curious if these new organ chain grinders, just your round chain grinder, go a little bit more, a little more than that. But that's you want to hear kind of something like that. As far as if it starts chopping, that's way too aggressive. We'll do a little bit more now looking at it. For this, I feel that to go a little bit more is better, so you get a perfect tooth. So now what we're going to do is we're going to eyeball how high to run this arm. This may not be the correct way to operate this guy, but this is what the way that I've been using, kind of a self-taught, what I feel works the best. We're going to do one light pass here, then we'll dial it in. We're not removing enough material to get that top plate completely sharp. So it's important on any type of chain grinder, when you're filing, you don't have to worry about this. But you do not want to get those teeth too hot. If you do that, you're really just going backwards. You're only making it, you're kind of essentially ruining the chain. Once that tooth gets hot, it won't hold an edge like a tooth that didn't get too hot. It'd be kind of interesting to see how these are sharpened from the factory when they're made. It'd be an interesting thing to see. So a light initial pass, I'd say minimum of 2, regardless of what type of chain grinder you have. You can see why I like this upgraded wheel here. The plastic one it just has too much drag. So we'll loosen this back up and we're gonna go down a little bit. See how that is. Go down a little bit more. Let's try that. See how it does on the next tooth. So I bumped it down a little bit beyond what I would do per pass. So I'll do light passes here. Try to do them light to prevent the teeth from getting too hot. That'll probably be the final depth that will go to keep this chain for this sharpening. Cleaning the chains prior to sharpening really extends that wheel life. That wheel gets loaded up with debris from oil to whatever, cutting wood, and the cleaner that you keep it, the longer that it stays sharp. So that tooth looks pretty good. That's the first one. And we're just on the edge. I guess that's probably about the max that I'd want to take without getting the teeth too hot. You can kind of just gauge by how long that it's contacting the wheel. But in order for this chain to cut sharp, you gotta go, this would be easier to show you on this side, you gotta go until that, I guess this side was in better condition than the other, but you got to go until that corner is completely perfect. It's got a perfect point on it. If you hit something, unfortunately, you have to grind the chain back to where it's back to uniform if you're running an RS chain or a full chisel chain. It's just, fortunately, that's just how it goes here. My table actually is kind of sunk into the ground a little bit because it's just on the flat ground. It's got little feet on it, but it's kind of sunk down. It's a little bit too low. And that little burr there is no big deal. It'll get knocked off as soon as you start cutting. That top plate is sharp. Probably could have took a little bit less and not had any of those. Well, that tooth got a little bit hot. It's okay to mess up, but you know, you're trying to avoid the teeth getting too hot. So what I'll do real quick here is I'm just gonna do a light touch up on this wheel. That was enough. And we'll just go around one more time. You can just hear how much better it's sharpening. with that little bit of buildup removed. I can operate this one much quicker than I can a round chain grinder, just the way that you kind of can position yourself. See, my fingers are holding the chain, but then moving the chain between each tooth. Is this necessary to hold the chain between each tooth? My opinion, yes, because the stiller that you can keep it, the more that you can prevent movement, the sharper that it'll be. So we'll flip her around, we'll do this other side here. I may touch the rakers a little bit since I know I'm going to be mainly just cutting smaller wood from here on. I've kind of cut all my wood that I'm going to split and stack to replace what my piles currently have on them. That's all my cutting. I stay about 1 year in advance, so all the wood that I've hauled up that you've seen, I'll be replenishing all my piles as I sell them. That's just the way that I've done it, and that seems to work the best. We're going to dress this wheel now that it's going the other direction. Just remove that slight little bit of buildup from doing that finishing pass. Is this necessary? Me, yeah. But I just know that these wheels really like to be clean. They just work the best when they're clean. So on this side, I'm not going to move it back up because I want both sides to be the same. I'm just going to make several really light passes to get it down. And this one I've moved a good amount, so that was a turn and a half, or half a turn. So I'll bump her down half a turn so I get the same height. I haven't seen anyone else make anything about your adjustment, because you want to keep that corner right in the corner of the tooth, but this is just the way that I've been doing it. And the chain's cut pretty good, so I mean, there's basic videos on like Bailey's of how to operate this chain grinder, but nothing as far as your chains wear down, how are you controlling that corner being in the corner of the tooth. The sun's pretty hot. Back to the beginning. Making just real light passes, trying to prevent that wheel from loading up. This side, technically, you could run it a little bit higher, but I really like to keep the chains the same on both sides as best that I can. Next pass will go slightly lower. Maybe do a quarter of a turn on that knob. I throw a little wood in that stove once I get done here. My stove, I would describe it as hungry. It burns a lot of wood. I mean, honestly, this side, since it didn't hit anything, I would call it good, but we'll get it close to the other side as far as the depth. Keep it uniform. Probably have to make 2 passes here to get it finished up. So I tried the square file end back before I got this chain grinder, and it just takes too much time. If you're not cutting that much, I could see it being a good option, but if you cut a lot, then this is the way to go. And I'm kind of feeling each tooth. You know, as I'm rotating it forward here, I'm feeling that tooth a little bit to feel how warm that it is before I start to hold it. Just so I can gauge if I'm getting the teeth too hot. My method for that is if it's too hot to touch, then I feel that you're getting them too hot. But the goal of sharpening like this is to prevent getting the teeth too hot. I feel like that's probably a pretty common mistake. And those teeth, they get a little too hot. I'm sure they cut really good for the first couple logs, but then they don't last. They don't stay sharp for very long. Pretty much almost done here. So get back to the beginning. You want to keep both sides of the chain relatively close to the same as far as their height. You don't have to have it perfect. You can kind of do what I just did, but you want to keep them close. Let's see what that next one. I guess these couple right here. We'll hit these couple because I can see that they need just a little bit more. So I'm not really using that stop, I'm just going by eye. You can use it as a little finger rest too. A little too far. And there's this chain. Previously, I must have took these teeth down a little bit farther. I guess we'll just go back to the beginning. That's another thing. I don't know if you caught that, but that tooth was slightly up here. So it was slightly raised here in the front, if you can see that. And you really want to try to avoid that as well. That was one of the reasons that I decided to buy this, because literally almost every tooth with that plastic piece that comes on this, you would have to kind of push down with your finger, and that was just really annoying. So that's one real good benefit to this upgraded wheel. All right, that is it. This chain is sharp. Let's go check the rakers. You see my top plate angle. I always guesstimate this on this flat piece here, my organ chain grinder. That's just the way that I've always done it. We got a little ruler here. That's my little gauge, so yeah, we got to come down a little bit. And I've got this arm all the way over to try to get more of a sloped raker. We'll say that this will be our depth. Let's call that the depth. We'll do just these two. Actually, we'll do these two since I just said it. If you got one raker that's slightly lower, it ain't gonna make a significant difference. Just like if you had one tooth that really got whacked and you filed it back a little bit farther, it's not gonna make a huge difference. We're gonna go a little bit out. It's always good to get this kind of set up with two teeth here first to get it kind of the exact amount that you want. So that's the depth that I'm going to go. I don't know if the sloped raker works any better, but that's what I've been running. My chain grinder is so worn out here that you gotta hold it every time in order for it to clamp. If you don't have these clamped good, especially for rakers, it'll chatter and mess your wheel up. So that's kind of why I'm doing it this way. .72 drive lengths here, 20-inch chain. It's a good length for your smaller cutting. Personally, I don't see much difference between a 16 and a 20. I'd rather just run a 20 to get a little bit more bar length for a little bit bigger wood. And we are done. Oh, I got one more. All right, there we go. We'll do a check on that far side because it's a little bit easier to see. Just so I have a little mental note of this. Okay. I would estimate that that gap is probably 45 thousandths. I'll go slightly more aggressive if I'm running a saw with more power, like my 440 500i, but this one, I try to keep it, this 400C, I try to keep it between 40 and 45 thousandths. That's kind of, so I'll go a little bit more so that I can get two sharpenings without having to touch the rakers. So you want to verify that your slot here is clean. You always want to flip your bar every time you do sharpen a chain on it. That's just a good practice. I'm gonna throw this on and I'll be cutting some pine this afternoon, making some kindling. Yeah, I'm kind of glad that it warmed up this afternoon. It was pretty cool out this morning. It was sweatshirt weather and I was probably in the 40s or so. But you got to take advantage of these warmer afternoons to do some of the things that or a little bit easier to do when it's warm out. So my method for tightening your chain, I'm going to go a little bit tighter than that. Go a little bit down. So the chain will tighten up just a little bit when you tighten that bar, because that bar is sitting in there when it's not tight, it's sitting in there slightly offset. My hand is just an exaggeration. So when you tighten it, even though that there's a slight gap here, you know, there's a fingernail gap underneath the chain, when I tighten it down and it becomes flat like that, that chain will suck up a little bit. The longer that the bar is, the more of an exaggeration that this is, but this is really about as tight as I want the chain to be. Sometimes you'll need a slight adjustment out in the woods, but my thing is especially on these shorter bars, if you're not cutting a lot of limbs and stuff where you could throw a chain, I like the chain to not come to an abrupt stop when you let off the throttle. So the chain, if you had it really tight, it would just come to a complete stop, but you know, it'll come to a stop a little bit slower than that. Like if the saw was running and you've seen that, I would say that's probably a little too tight, but you'll see, I guess I'll probably put how the saw cuts into the video. I think it's relevant. Kind of edit it all into one video and just show the whole process and how it cuts. But you'll see that the chain doesn't come to a complete stop, and I feel that saves your bar tips. Obviously you don't want the chain to be, you know, where you can see the bottom of the drive link. You know, that's too loose if it was down here. But here I feel that it's going to tighten up just a little bit when I run it, so this will be about right. Just kind of something that you have to figure out and experiment with on your own, but that's just the way that I do it. So I'm gonna get her loaded up, and then I guess the next thing you'll see is me cutting with it.